Welcome everybody to today's session of Rabbi Akiva, Lessons in Reinvention After Disaster. So today we are going to be discussing Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kochba. Is it a rebellion or a religious revolution? What exactly is going on with Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kochba? What connection do they have one to another, and what does that help inform us? So first, I'd like to simply outline for everybody what we're going to try and look into tonight. And if anybody has any other questions besides what are listed here, feel free to ask me them towards the end. But again, here's just going to outline what we're going to try and cover tonight. So the first thing we're going to try and cover is who was Bar Kochba, and why he relates to Rabbi Akiva. We're going to relate to why would Rabbi Akiva have put his full support behind such an individual named such as Bar Kochba. We're then going to discuss, did Rabbi Akiva's students die as part of the failed rebellion of Bar Kochba? And finally, we're going to discuss what happened to Rabbi Akiva after the rebellion. Okay? So we're also going to, as part of this, we're also going to be discussing, seeing as tonight is going to be Lag BaOmer. For me, I'm currently actually in Israel, so it already is Lag BaOmer. I know in the middle of this year, we're going to be transitioning. So at that point, and we'll pause, and whoever hasn't has yet to have said, will then be able to say the Omer then. Because I know it's always hard to remember. So that way we'll manage to remember to do that. Okay, so now let's get started. So the first question I asked is, who is Bar Kochba? So to this, I turn everybody's attention to the Gemara and Talmud Yerushalmi Masechet Ta'anit, where we have a statement by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So he says that my teacher Rabbi Akiva would expound on the verse, "A star has risen from Yaakov, Darach Kocbha Yaakov." And what would he say? That whenever Rabbi Akiva would see Bar Kochba, right, Bar Kochba, he would say that is the king, the Messiah. That is Melech HaMashiach. So apparently, whenever Rabbi Akiva saw Bar Kochba, he was certain that this is the Mashiach, our Savior, who will lead us into out of the current terrible plight they were in of the destroyed temple and being unable to have Jewish sovereignty. He saw the leader who will bring us to that point in Bar Kochba. On the other hand, there's other sages who were not of the same opinion, such as Rabbi Yochanan ben Torah, who said to him, "Akiva, grass will grow on your cheeks, and the son of David, meaning Mashiach, will still not have come." So, what exactly is going on here? Why is Rabbi Akiva so certain that Bar Kochba is the one, while others are not quite as certain? Why did Rabbi Akiva put his full weight behind Bar Kochba? Well, as you may have noticed, by calling him Bar Kochba, that actually isn't his name. So what does the name Bar Kochba mean? Anybody know?
Son of a star.
Right, son of a star. Right? Which is a very positive name, right? Son of a star, right? A rising star. And particularly the star that's going to rise from Yaakov and save us, right? Seemingly very positive title. But what was his actual name? So before we get to the actual name, a little bit about background on Bar Kochba. So Bar Kochba was the leader of the rebellion of the Jewish people against Rome in 132 to 135 CE. The rebellion had original roots were based on the fact that the Emperor Hadrian, the ruler of the Roman Emperor at the time, he was trying to, as part of his grand plan for remaking the Roman Empire in his own image, he wanted to fix up some of the problematic Jews that had been rebelling previously, and he did not like Jerusalem, so he decided to plow over Jerusalem and instead construct Isla Capitoline, meaning his own holy capital on top of it. And he wanted to replace where the temple would have been built instead with the temple of Jupiter. So, and as you see here, this is one of the Bar Kochba coins. So it'll also teach us a little bit about what Bar Kochba stood for. Okay, yeah, I know we still haven't gotten his name. We'll get there. So as far as Bar Kochba, son of the star. So everybody see we're moving my pointer? Yes?
No.
No, you don't see it? Okay, 1 second.
I see it.
You do, yeah.
Okay, it's on the top, on the left coin. You see there's a picture of what looks like the BAYT and Mikdash. Right, so they're fighting for the rebuilding of the temple. Right, and in the center you see this is a picture of what the Aron would look like, and on top you see the star. Right, the star as in Bar Kochba. You see that, I hope. Okay, and also you'll note that on the back of the coin here is a lulav, which we'll get to in a little bit. So we see that Bar Kochba, right? So in the essence of his rebellion is very clearly to rebuild the BAYT and Mikdash, the temple, and he's doing so seemingly for the right reasons. Against the corrupt Roman regime, who's doing their best to uproot the Jews and their ability to serve God. So, but as far as what his actual name is, so we actually didn't know his name for the longest time. Right? We know him as Bar Kochba or Bar Kochba, which we'll get to what that means also in just a moment. So which is son of the star, right? That's why everybody's heard of the Bar Kochba rebellion, but that's not actually his name. So as you see here, I know it's a little bit hard to read, but this particular fragment of a letter was written on papyrus. And again, it's a little hard to make out, but this is a letter that we have from Bar Kochba. It says Mishimon ben Kusba, Liation. Okay. Okay, so this is an actual letter that it was commissioned by Bar Kochba to his officers, which were found in the cave of letters by Professor Yigal Yadin in 1960. Okay, so we actually know what his real name was, which is Shimon Bar Kochba. So now I want to go back and explain. We saw some of his names so far, right? So what is the difference? Why would we call him? 1 second. Go the wrong way. Here we go. Let's go back a little bit. So again, we saw that his name Bar Kochba. So how do you get from Bar Kochba to Bar Kochba? So again, they look pretty similar, right? One's got a samach, one's got a chaf, but they're pretty similar. So changing the name from Bar Kochba to being son of the star will be a very positive name change, right? And that's a name change that Rabbi Akiva gave to Bar Kochba. On the other hand, the Gemara uses the term Bar Kochba with a Zion, as opposed to the Samach, which his name is actually spelled, which actually is a very negative name. And it means son of a lie or son of deception. So why would you have one or the other? We'll get to that in a little bit. But bear in mind that if you view Shimon Bar Kochba or Bar Kochba positively, then you call him son of a star. Negatively, you call him son of a lie. Okay, so now, so here's the fragment of the letter. So I want to focus on one letter in particular that they found in the Judean desert in the cave of the letters, which will hopefully be very informative about what Bar Kochba stood for. So here we go. So this is called the letter of the four species, or in Hebrew, Igeret Arba'at Haminim. So I have for you here. We have the original letter. If you again, it's a little hard to read. The transcription of it above into its original Aramaic. If you know Aramaic, great. But for those of us who don't, we're just going to simply read the English because that'll because that would get the message. Okay. So would somebody like to read the English on the left?
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Bernstein.
Okay. Shimon to Yehuda, Bar Menashe in Kiryat Arbaya. I have sent to you 2 donkeys, and you must send with them 2 men to Yonatan, son of Be'ayan, and to Masabala, in order that they shall pack and send to the camp towards you palm branches and citrons. And you, from your place, send others who will bring you myrtles and willows. See that they are tithed and send them to the camp. The request is made because the army is big. Be well.
Okay. So what is going on here, right? So this is a letter being sent to the military camp of, right? This is Shimon Bar Kochba sending a letter to somebody in Hebron, right? Kiryat Arba, to asking to bring the Arba minim, the 4 species that we use every Sukkot, and asking to bring a lot of them in exchange for some animals. So that way, all of his soldiers could properly observe the mitzvah of the 4 species of lulav and etrog, hadassah and araba. So, and I mentioned before that we were looking at the coin. So what they have on the back here?
Arba minim.
These are the arba minim. Also interesting to note is that we see there's actually one of each of the given species, right? We have, which is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva from the Gemara. It's also interesting. Okay, so we see that that it was very important to Bar Kochba and his followers that they could properly observe the mitzvot and Torah, and that's a part and parcel of the rebellion. So if you're wondering why would Rabbi Akiva have thought he's the right one, so he's rebelling for the right reasons. He is religious. He is, and also as opposed to many other rebellions that had happened previously, there wasn't a large degree of infighting, right? Almost all of the Jewish people were behind him. So, and as far as Rabbi Akiva's personal support for the rebellion, so beyond simply he was the one who actually named Bar Kochba, there's also something else as well. So here is a story from the Gemara of Avodah Zarah, talking about, again, it's giving advice for travelers, what you should say to people on the way. So this is what, so there's an advice about how you're supposed to, properly deal with bandits. So here is one of the here's one of these stories of good advice to have for a traveler. So an incident occurred involving several students of Rabbi Akiva who were traveling to Kziv. Along the way, bandits encountered them and said to them, "Where are you going?" Rabbi Akiva's students said to them, "To Akka." Once they reached Kziv, Rabbi Akiva's students separated from the bandits. At this point, the bandits said to them, "Whose students are you?" The students said to the bandits, "We are students of Rabbi Akiva." The bandits said unto them, "Fortunate are Rabbi Akiva and his students, as they were never harmed by an evil person." So, what is going on here, right? Well, this seems a little cryptic. So one thing is that Akko and Kziv are different places. So they cut their journey short and they left a little bit early. So that was. But what's going on with the response of these bandits? So it's worthy to note that these bandits weren't necessarily violent bandits. Because note also these bandits for some reason had very deep respect for Rabbi Akiva. So as I saw in a book by Rabbi Bini Lau called Chachamim, that are sages, where he quotes opinions that the reason for this is because Rabbi Akiva was known to be a supporter of the underground, at that time had been an underground rebellion, and he was very much supportive of those going against the Romans. So normally these bandits may have attacked somebody, but they would never attack a student of Rabbi Akiva because everybody knew what Rabbi Akiva stood for and what he meant and how he meant to help all the Jews and eventually getting freed from the Roman rule. So Rabbi Akiva is known far and wide as a supporter of this rebellion, which later becomes Bar Kochba. When it's underground, that's when they're simply known as bandits. But later on, when it becomes a full-blown rebellion, that's when it becomes the Bar Kochba revolt. Somebody asked in the chat, is there a reminder hint here of the Maccabees? So the rebellion of the Maccabees was roughly 2.5 centuries prior. So yes, there is some elements that are similar in terms of the fact that they were both done on religious grounds. But as far as the connection between the two, not quite. Yes.
It's interesting that it says they were traveling to Kaziv.
Right. So this is on the border. This is on the northern border of Israel, the northeastern border.
That's a real place.
It's a real place.
Because it sounds like his name,
Right. It does. Right. It does sound like Kaziv, like Bar Kochba, but it is actually a real place. And when the Mishnah and Gemara talk about the borders of Israel, so from Akko to Kaziv is considered to be on the very border. So that could also be part of the point as well, because they were trying to figure out, are you heading to a Jewish town or a non-Jewish town, whether we should suspect you of being with the enemy or not, and should we kill you? Which did happen sometimes. If the bandits thought you were going with the Romans, they would kill you as a sympathizer. Sometimes rightfully, sometimes wrongly. For more on that, that's we don't have enough time to deal with that now. But we'll see some of those issues come up later. Some of the other stories involving Bar Kochba. Okay, so the next story I'd like to focus on is the story up front in the Gemara Yerushalmi and Ta'anit. She's talking about what led up to and then the end of the Bar Kochba rebellion. So one thing to note is the number of people who ended up passing away as a result of the rebellion. So, which also tells you about the widespread support. So the number of people, so Rabbi Yochanan said that Hadrian Caesar killed 800,000 people in Beitar, right, which was the capital and last stronghold of the rebellion. And as far as how many people were required to take over it, Rabbi Yochanan said they needed 80,000 pairs of hornblowers to lay siege, and it took them, and we'll see in a little bit, it took them 3.5 years to do so. We'll also see towards the end also parallels sources in Roman sources as well that gives very similar numbers and indicate just how difficult it was for Rome to root out this rebellion. Remember that at the time, Rome had a sprawling empire going from Persia all the way to modern day England. So yeah, the Jews were, a thorn in their side for several years, and they couldn't beat that. Okay, so now, but let's focus a little more on a more troubling part of the Bar Kochba rebellion. Right, until now, I've discussed the very positive sides of it, but there's also here some negative sides that the rabbis are bringing up. Okay, so Bar Kochba was there with 200,000 troops that had fingers missing. Okay, why would they have fingers missing? Because they've been bitten off in tests of bravery. So, yes, a little macabre. So the sages asked him, Bar Kochba, until when will you make Israel maimed? So Bar Kochba replied, how else should I test their loyalty? They said, you could have them go out on horseback, and whoever can uproot a cedar astride a horse, then that shows that they must be worthy, because it's not something the normal person could do. And 200,000 more men were able to now join up with Bar Kochba as a result of that being the test, as opposed to the biting off of your finger. Okay, so yeah, so this seems to be like, again, a lot of very impressive Jewish people joining the rebellion. But there's also a troubling element to this, to what's going on here. One is, we mentioned, again, this sounds, the whole biting off of the finger sounds weird, which could be troubling. And there's also their battle, what they said before battle, is also very troubling. So that's the last paragraph over here. So would you like to read it? The last paragraph over here.
Okay, no one else.
Thank you, Dr. Bernstein.
Okay, before they went to battle, they would say, Master of the universe, don't support nor embarrass us. But you have rejected us, Hashem. Oh God, oh God, you do not march with our armies. A pasuk in Tehillim.
Okay, so what would that phrase mean? Saying that before battle. What do we think?
It could imply trust in their strength as opposed to God.
Right? It sounds like they very much have trust in their strength and not in God. To not ask God to be part of your battles is a problem. As is seen throughout Tanakh, very essential to winning any battle is having divine support behind you. Yet, here the followers of Bar Kochba are, for some whatever reason, rejecting divine aid. So the question is why? So read most charitably, one would say that true, they have faith in God, but in the battlefield, believing in God isn't going to help them win. Right? They have to do all that they can in order to win, and if God's going to be there, he'll be there. But you can't rely on miracles. But many read this in a different fashion, saying that no, this is actually one of the main issues of the rebellion, is that initially they may have done it for the right reasons, but eventually they fell into the trap of that it is my strength and my might that built up this great army, not God's. Right? So that's a verse from Deuteronomy. So that verse is seemingly of their own conceit, seemingly is coming true here, which would be quite a problem for a rebellion and a revolt of the scale, for them to have, which came from a root of wanting to serve God. Losing that would be a terrible problem. Yes, Claudette. You're muted.
About that, I have a question about that statement, not believing in God. By the time they got to the revolution, they were going through a lot of torment by the Romans. I think they had lost faith by then. Would you say? So
that's the question. Have they lost faith or not at this point? Right. So
at this point, they really lose faith. But before all of this, they were going through a lot by the Romans, right? And I would think that they thought God had failed them.
Right. Right, but that giving up would be a problem, as we've noted. Yes. As in previous stories of Rabbi Akiva, he was the one who never gave up. Right. We'll get some more stories of Rabbi Akiva to that effect, but Rabbi Akiva is the one who never gave up. Right, when all of his friends saw the destroyed temple, and then they wept for the fact that it could never be rebuilt. Rabbi Akiva was the one who saw that when he saw the fox walking on through, he remembered other prophecies saying that true, it is now destroyed, but eventually, again, just like the negative prophecies are being fulfilled, so to the positive ones will be in the future. So Rabbi Akiva is somebody who sees the negative, but is able to see the positive even within the tragedy, right? And that's part of who Rabbi Akiva is, right? That even if it had been a seemingly hopeless situation, again, Rabbi Akiva was somebody who had seen the first, had been in the temple and had seen it, and had also seen it destroyed, and yet he's still, again, this is now almost 7 years later, I believe 60 or so years after the destruction, right? This is when the rebellion is taking place. So again, then Rabbi Akiva was a young man. Now he is definitely not a young man. Yet he is still putting his support behind the rebellion. So, but again, it could be that not everybody had the same degree of faith as Rabbi Akiva did.
Yeah, I think the army lost faith. You can see.
Right. So the army may have lost faith, which is a big problem. If because as we said, the God being behind you is a very large part of it. Okay. So then, now continuing on with the story. Again, this is a continuation of the Gemara that we started before. So again, you'll note the English is a little bit longer than the Hebrew here because there's a lot filled in. So now we're talking about what led to the end of their fall. Right? How did Beitar end? So for 3.5 years, Hadrian surrounded Beitar, and what kept them from falling is that Rabbi Elazar Hamadai sat in sackcloth and ashes and prayed every day, Master of the universe, do not sit in judgment today. Do not sit in judgment today. So yeah, that phrase sounds very similar to the phrase we just read about what they said when they went to battle, about how not a positive prayer, but a God don't get involved type prayer. Okay, so the question is, why is this again? Rabbi Elazar Madai, why does he simply say God helps them? Right, so it's also a question. Again, because Rabbi Elazar Madai is one of the Tanaim, one of the sages who are quoted in the Mishnah. So the question is, so why is he simply stating as he is stating? Like, why is he not asking for more? So that might be part of the problem of Bar Kochba, which we'll see. So now we're getting to the actual end. What happens? Okay, so Hadrian was ready to leave the city, give up on the siege. And then what happens? A Samaritan said to him, right? Or you see in the Hebrew it says the word kuti. Basically, these are groups of Jews who had split off from the general populace, and they had certain tensions between them. More to explain the full tensions, can't go into now, but suffice it to say, you'll see what this Samaritan was up to and why he is not viewed positively. So the Samaritan turned to Hadrian and said, do not go, meaning don't give up, because I see that the city is prepared to surrender to you. So what did he do? He entered the gate of the city. He went up and found Rabbi Elazar Madai standing and praying. He whispered into his ear. People of the city saw that, and they went to Kocbha, right, to Bar Kochba. They said to him, we saw this old one, the Samaritan, talking to your uncle, Elazar. And Bar Kochba said to him, the Samaritan, what did you say to each other? So, and he said, if I would tell you, the king would kill me, and if I do not tell you, you will kill me. Better that the king should kill me and not you. So he said to me, I will surrender this city. So the Samaritan tells that to Bar Kochba. Now Bar Kochba went to Rabbi Elazar and said, what did the Samaritan say to you? Okay, and Rabbi Elazar said, nothing. Then Bar Kochba continues, what did you say to him? Nothing. And Bar Kochba kicked him and killed him. Immediately, a heavenly voice came out and said, woe to the worthless shepherd who leads his flock, destruction to his arm and his right eye. His arm will dry up and his right eye will become opaque. So God is saying, you have killed Rabbi Elazar Madai, the arm of all Israel, and her right eye. Therefore shall the arm of this man be withered and his right eye utterly blinded. Immediately, Beitar was conquered and Ben Kocbha was killed. They went and carried his head to Hadrian. And Hadrian says to the people who brought him his head, who killed this man? And the Samaritan said to him, I killed him. So Hadrian says, show me his corpse. He showed him his corpse, and he found a snake wound around it. And he said, if God did not kill him, who could have killed him? And he said about him, unless the rock sold them, their Lord has given them up. So what is happening in this story? We see that seemingly Hadrian was about to give up, and the person of courage who managed to convince him otherwise was a Samaritan, and he managed to basically sow dissent within the ranks, which led to the unfortunate death of Rabbi Madai, the uncle of Bar Kochba, which then led to the destruction of the city. So, what does this seem to tell us about the revolt and its end? Why did the revolt fail? So, yes, Claudette.
People were turning on each other. I think because the people were turning on each other, they gave up their own.
Right.
Samaritans.
Right, because people started turning on each other. For whatever reason, people lost faith in the cause. And that's the problem. Right? And that in turn led to their demise. But also seems to be an element of the fact that the people themselves had also lost faith in God. Right? And since then, and that's why we see the quotation of the verses are talking all about how God is the one who sold them out. Right? It's not that the Jews couldn't have won, it's that God sells them out, which is interesting because note that remember the prayer that the soldiers used to say before battle is to tell God, keep out of this. And then also with the prayer of Rabbi Madai was, God, please don't sit in judgment today. Right, which is also not an atypical prayer, more like a God, let us handle this type of prayer. And in the end, right, God ends up getting involved, and because we don't deserve for God to support us, we end up losing. So it's quite a very sad ending, but unfortunately, that is how the revolt ended. So, but this is only one approach for how the revolt ended. So there's another approach which is a little more troubling, found in the Gemara Sanhedrin, 93b. Okay, so this is talking about Mashiach, as it is written, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord, shall make him quick of understanding in the fear of the Lord. Okay, so this is talking about Yeshayahu prophesizing about Mashiach, the future redeemer of the Jewish people, and saying, and some of the features that he will have, right? Wisdom, understanding, right? Spirit of counsel and might, and spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. So the question is, which one of these were seen in various potential leaders of the Jewish people, meaning so who do we have? So Rabbi Alexander said, this teaches that he loaded him with good deeds and suffering as a mill. So what makes you worthy is that you have good deeds. That's what makes it a worthy leader. But Rabbi said, he smells a man and judges, as it is written, he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, nor approve after the hearing of his ears, yet with righteousness shall he judge the poor. So one says, again, what the deciding factor is your good deeds or the suffering that you got to that point. Another one says it's based on his ability for discernment. So now Bar Kochba reigned for 2.5 years and then said to the rabbis, I am the Messiah. They answered, of the Messiah, it is written, he smells and judges. Let us see whether he can do so. And when they saw that Bar Kochba was unable to judge by the scent, then they, the rabbis, slew him. Okay, so this is a very different end to Bar Kochba. One of the end being by the rabbis straight up killed him for not being who he said he was supposed to be. Okay, so yeah, so which we mentioned before about infighting, this seems to be just that. So what's going on? So odds are this is not to be taken literally that he killed him. More like that's when they gave up on him. As we mentioned before, how some rabbis thought that Bar Kochba was not simply couldn't have been the Messiah for whatever other reasons, and that we indicated here. So, and as far as could he really have, and now now the next question comes, well, we have two reasons for why he seemingly wasn't the right one. One is due to his having, the weird prayer and his lack of involvement of God, leading to eternal strife, and also seemingly some lacking in leadership or judging qualities, as seen in this Gemara in Sanhedrin. So what does that mean about how could Rabbi Akiva have thought that Bar Kochba really was the son of the star, the one who could have redeemed us? So the answer to that is, so this is from Rambam in the Hilchot Melachim, Laws of Kings. Question of how do you know who Mashiach is? How do you know who is the King Messiah? So it should not occur to you that the King Messiah must bring wondrous signs, or perform marvels, or invent new things, or revive the dead, or anything like that. What the fools say. It is not so. For Rabbi Akiva, one of the wisest of the sages of the Mishnah was Ben Kusiba, Bar Kochba, arms bearer, right, or staunch supporter. Again, depends on how you translate Nosei Kelev. And said that he was, and used to call before Bar Kochba, saying he is the king, the Messiah, Melech HaMashiach. He and all the sages of his generations thought that he was the king, the Messiah, until he was killed because of his sins. Right? As far as the sins are, again, where it's italicized as editions of the translator, not original to the Rambam. All right, to Maimonides. And then since he was killed, they then understood that he was not the one, and the sages never asked of him neither a sign nor a wonder. Okay, so what happened here? Right, so this is the Rambam, again, this is over a century later, describing what had occurred, that the rabbis thought that Bar Kochba could have been the Mashiach because he was, seemingly, was doing this for all the right reasons. And when do they figure out that he wasn't the right leader? So according to the Rambam, it wasn't, they figured it out early because of some hint. It's like, no, despite any of the shortcomings he may have had, they only noticed when he died. Right? Until then, there still was hope, and it was entirely possible that, true, was he perfect? No. Did he perform miracles? Well, I mean, there are stories in the Gemara that describe the feats of strength, as well as militarily that Bar Kochba performed. But again, that's not what made them choose him. What made them choose him is for his potential, what he could have been, and the fact that you only know that he wasn't the Mashiach is something you find out only after he has failed in his revolution, only after he did not fulfill the promise that he should have been able to fulfill. Understood?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that is so as far as Bar Kochba and Rabbi Akiva goes. So again, Rabbi Akiva was the most staunch supporter, but in the end, what proved it? Either, despite, again, we mentioned the shortcomings of eternal strife, the perhaps not absolute faith in God, but that wasn't enough to determine it was no good. What determined it was at the end simply the fact that we saw that it didn't work. So, right, so I see Sammy Metzger wrote in the chat that, right, Ramos is 1,000 years later. Correct. The question is, right, so Ben Tortell, the question is, when is he making that comment? For a lot of the stories of the Talmud, the question is also, where they said, is it slightly out of order or not? Like this story, when, again, was Ben Tortell really alive at the time of the revolt, or is it simply a story inflected back in? So you could argue whether or not that necessarily how that story went down. But definitely, many of the rabbis at the time thought that, or maybe not all of them, but many of them definitely thought that Bar Kochba was Mashiach, even though he ultimately was not. Okay, so now here I mentioned before about Cassius Dio in terms of the numbers. So again, so again, we're not going to go through it because we're very much running out of time here. So just want to point out that in terms of how hard the war was for the Romans, the last line here, that many Romans moreover perished in this war. Therefore, Hadrian, in writing to the Senate, did not employ the opening phrase commonly affected by the emperors. If you and your children are in health as well, I and legions are in health. That the battle was quite hard for the Romans as well. And again, even though hundreds of thousands of Jews passed away, the Romans definitely had a very hard time eventually winning the war. It took them many years, which again, 3.5 years for the Roman Empire, which was, when it's at its heyday, is quite surprising. Okay, so this is I would call more or less the first half of this year, right? Again, so we're gonna do a little bit of a wrap up. So why wasn't he the Mashiach, right? Bar Kochba? Because either A, he died, his sins relative hamodai, meaning his killing him off eternal strife and not probably having faith in his followers, or because the followers didn't fully believe in God, as indicated by the weird phrase they used to say of God not be with us nor against us, or they headed out to battle. Okay, so now we're heading into the okay, so now again, one last point on Rabbi Akiva's overall life. So this is, again, I'm going to explain it outside because I know we're out of time and I wanted to get to all the points that I told people that I would be getting to. So again, Rabbi Akiva's eventual death. So Rabbi Akiva ended up passing away by refusing to follow the laws of the Roman Empire. After the failed Bar Kochba revolt, there was a law put forth by the Romans that Jews were no longer allowed to learn Torah. So there's also this edict may also have been in effect prior to it as well, but we'll go with the opinion that this is done afterwards. So Rabbi Akiva, despite the fact that there's this edict, he does not give up, and he keeps teaching Torah publicly. Eventually, he gets arrested. He gives, and then when asked, why did you do so? Why you keep risking your life? And he says, Jews are like fish in water, and the Romans are like a fox. The fox says, oh, sees fish trying to escape the net, and says, the fox says, come out on dry land. There's no nets here. But the fish say, that's silly fox. If we leave the water, we'll for sure die. Better to stay in the water where sure we might be caught, but it's worth it. So parallel there is that Jews can't live without Torah. Therefore, I'm going to defy the decree, even no matter what may come of it. Then last, unfortunately, the result of that, and moving on to the right column, is that he was eventually captured, imprisoned for several years, and ultimately was put to death quite cruelly via having his flesh torn apart by iron combs. But even so, in his death, he never gave up faith, dying when he said while saying the Shema, ending on the word Echad, God is one. So Rabbi Akiva had a very unfortunate end, but as far as was his faith broken by these failed revolts of Bar Kochba, the answer is definitely not. But the other question is that I said I would get to, which again, apologize for not going through the sources inside, is what happened with the 24,000 students and their having died because of not honoring each other and how that relates to Bar Kochba. So this theory has gained a lot of traction in recent years, but first let's go through the basic Gemara, which I believe we have another 5 minutes till it is going to be sundown in Toronto. So then at that point we'll pause. Everybody who has not yet said Omer will say so, and then we will continue on with the shir. Okay. Again, I know it's going a little bit long. My apologies. But we will get to everything. Okay. So this is the story leading up to why the Omer is a sad time. So Rabbi Akiva says that the verse should be understood as follows: if one studied Torah in his youth, he should study more Torah in his old age. If he had students in his youth, he should have additional students in his old age, as it is stated. In the morning, sow your seed, and then in the evening you'll be able to gather it. So they said, for example, Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students in an area of land that stretched from Kocbha to Antipatris in Judea. And they all died in one period of time because they did not treat each other with respect. And the world was desolate of Torah until Rabbi Akiva came to our rabbis in the south and taught his Torah to them. The second group of disciples consisted of Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Elazar ben Shemuel. These are the very ones that upheld the study of Torah at that time. Although Rabbi Akiva's earlier students did not survive, his later disciples were able to transmit the Torah to future generations. And with regards to the 12,000 pairs of Rabbi Akiva's students, the Gemara adds, it is taught that all of them died for the period from Passover until Shavuaton. Rabbi Chaim Bar Abba said, and some say Rabbi Akiva Bar Amin, they all died a bad death. And what is this bad death? Nachman said diphtheria. Okay, which is a very painful death by means of choking while you're alive. Okay, so that is the story, and that is why currently the Omer is a sad time. So as far as why we're going to, you're going to be saying the Omer for the 33rd day of the Omer in just moments. Again, I said I've said it already, being in Israel. So the reason why is because the people had stopped, that the students, with the condition that the students stopped dying on the 33rd of the Omer, and that's why we stopped the mourning, because the people have stopped dying. So now we should move on and transition to back to the Omer, how it should be. The Omer is supposed to be a happy time. So because it's, again, Pesach is a holiday, Shavuot is a holiday, in between should also be a holiday. The mitzvah every day as part of that holiday, so we should be doing that. Also, that is this week's parsha. We'll be reading that as well. Look forward to reading it. I don't know if you'll be able to read it in shul, but read it on your own. You'll be because we're going to be reading about the mitzvah. Okay. So I guess now let's pause for a second. I see that it is now Shkia. So I just want to remind everybody to here. Let me see if I can. 1 second. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to try and pull up the today's Omer. 1 moment, please. So everybody will be able to say it. 1 moment. Okay. Come on, open. Okay. If anybody has it in front of them, I think why is this? Okay, I'm not finding a text quickly online. My apologies. Okay, so I guess let's all say it together. Okay. Sorry for, yeah. Okay. Sorry, I don't have it. Oh, this doesn't have it in with transliterated. Okay, sorry. Okay, so hopefully everybody will be able to have it on their either on their phone if they have a sitter nearby. Okay, so I can't say the bracha because I've already said it. But so if somebody would like to say it, I see that. Oh, I see Elaine here. Let me spotlight Elaine because she has it. Here we go. Spotlight. Okay. So we're going to say it. So again, if you have, let's say I'll say it. Feel free to say it with me. Use God's name. I will not be. But if you haven't said the bracha, so baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sirat haomer. Hayom shlosha u'shloshim yom shehem arba'a shavuot v'chamisha yamim la'omer. Today is 33 days that are 4 weeks and 5 days in the Omer. Okay. Thank you, Elaine. Okay, so let me go back to sharing the PowerPoint. Now that we are now officially in Lag BaOmer, we can discuss the connection between Lag BaOmer and Bar Kochba. Okay. Again, if anybody has to go, I know that the hour is late. So I will not be offended. As far as if you want the more of the sources, so again, I'll again be pasting the link to the PowerPoint in the chat in case some people have to leave, so you can catch it later. Also, the recording will be uploaded to the Toronto Torah website for those listening as well. Okay. So now that we've read the Gemara about the Omer and Rabbi Akiva's students, now let's look into the question of were Rabbi Akiva's students part of the revolt or not? Okay, so this idea is first put forth by Rabbi Nachman Krochmal in 1851, meaning that until then nobody thought of this. But he puts forth when he actually suggested it, he doesn't actually give any actual textual proofs. He does it simply based on logic and reasoning. But he said that Rabbi Akiva supported the revolt and thousands of students died, so must be they were part of the revolt. If you want to read his original work inside, again, you can click through on the link here to somebody's paper discusses it and references it. Again, this the particular paper I'm referencing is actually by Rabbi Yismach, where he actually where he discusses why it's not, or he arguing against Rabbi Akiva's students, but he also brings the other side of the argument too. So if you want to read the other side of the argument, you can see his references there. Okay, so that was the first. I'm going to have to apologize for not being able to go through all of the sources inside. Just again, I know in the interest of time, I want to see if we can get this done. I'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. But again, the main focus was for Rabbi Akiva. This part is a little bit more of the icing on top of the cake. Okay, so here we go. So what is the support for why you'd say that? So people point to the fact that Rabbi Shira Gaon, he was again in the 11th century. So he used in a letter he uses the term Shamda instead of Askara, describing the deaths of Rabbi Akiva's students. So switching the term Shamda might be indicative of the term Shat Hashmad, times of duress, which would mean that the students didn't die from a sickness, but they died as a result of decrees, meaning because of the decrees against the Jews, meaning the Bar Kochba revolt. Other ideas put forth, such as by Rabbi Zaini, is the death by strangulation by Romans in Shat Hashmad, which would again that would be again relating to that. There's also the idea put forth by Rabbi Mordechai Cohen that Askar means soldier in Turkish, which would mean that they died by the hands of Roman soldiers. Okay, another one is by Rabbi Yehuda Rappaport, who says that it's based on death by sword, and which leads to asphyxiation. Again, it also ties into the above mentioned death by Turkish Askar death, which is also related to that as well. Okay. Other option is that the death is similar to that. Okay, right, that was similar to the above one. So let's get that one. And then another point is that Rabbi Distai says that they died from karet. And another version of the Gemara quoted in Echaraba. So saying they died from karet means that something divinely ordained, and that divinely ordained is because of the rebellion was not virtuous. Okay. So, and other support is saying that not owning one another can happen easily in a war, because wars often lead to civil wars, and that can lead to the war losing. So clearly, Rabbi Akiva's students were part of the war, and that's why that happened. So there's only a couple problems with that. Is the question is why that's not the case. So again, so some of the supports now here are going to be supports afterwards with the reason why not. So one issue is that you're saying, oh, that like maybe he's quoting the Gemara and mistranslating. The only problem is that that phrase wasn't in the original version of the Rosh Hashanah's letter. Okay, it's added by a printer, so that's not necessarily a proof. Okay, another problem is that the term Shamda doesn't necessarily mean, dying in the rebellion. It just means that it's a time when the when the rulers say that you can't learn Torah, which actually happened multiple times. We'll get to a little bit again later, right? It's not just happened after Bar Kochba, it also happened around 20 or so years earlier than that as well. There were other decrees of the Romans that prevented people from learning Torah and doing Brit Milah circumcision as well. Okay, so now as far as the actual text goes, so you know that you see there's two versions in front of us. So you know that one of them has, you see one of them has the word, that only one of them has the word Shamda in it, which is the one on the left, which is the Spanish Nusach. Okay, the one on the right, as you may notice, is shorter. Okay, so the question is which one of these is the more accurate of the text? And there is quite a bit of room to say that the one on the right is more accurate, because it is closer to the original text of the Gemara Yevamot, as well as by the fact that as far as in terms of its provenance, the provenance of the French one is stronger. For more on that, please look into how we decide amount manuscripts, and there are articles written about which one of them is right. But suffice it to say that the shorter Nusach is the one that's more likely to be correct, whereas the left one just has more interpolations from later writers trying to explain what it meant. Okay, so that would be why the use of the term Shamda might not be, as a support, might not be as strong. Okay, then other arguments you may have heard. Okay. Right, is that clearly that he clearly meant to use the word Shamda. The only problem is that Rav Haigon, which is Rosh Hashanah's son, when he's quoting that exact same Gemara, he simply quotes the Gemara as we have it in front of us. He does not use the word Shamda, which also is support for the fact that the version of his letter that had the term Shamda was incorrect. Okay, because again, some say, oh, it was a censor that got rid of it at some point in history. But if we're talking about censor, why would Rav Shrirgon's son censor out an edition when the Gaonim were writing in Bavel, which was not Christian controlled. It was actually Arab controlled at the time. So there would be no reason why they would be upset and worried about the Romans being angry at them for criticizing the Romans, because Romans were no longer, or even the Christians, which were the continuation of the Roman Empire, were not in charge of them anyways. Okay. Yeah, sorry for running through these principles quickly, but again, hopefully it'll be clear. For more, please see the article here. So one question is, how could 24,000 people have died? Maybe it's really just 300, as we see in one version. The answer is that, so therefore the 24,000 is referring to, must be the rebellion. The answer is like, no, Rabbi Akiva having 24,000 students is mentioned multiple times, as I believe Rabbi Chaim Metzger, where he talked about as well as Rabbi Metzger, they mentioned the Gemara Kocbha, about that Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students. So therefore, it's a reasonable number, and that he had 24,000, and like we know that he had that many students. Okay, some say, oh, it says in terms of Zugim, pairs to describe the students, so therefore must mean they were part of the battle. But more likely is that the term pairs are foils to not honoring even their Zug, their partner, their Chavrut and learning, which shows just how terrible the students of Rabbi Akiva were in that shortcoming of theirs, which is why they were worthy of the death by plague. Okay, so I believe that was the question that was asked by Charles earlier. So again, so that's the answer to your question, right? Because the answer is just that's how bad it is to not honor one another. That's also elaborated upon more in the Maharal Prague. But again, for more on that, please see the BAYT bulletin for this week, where I quote. We'll discuss that a bit more. Okay. Now, the other people say that when it says between Gevet and Ented Pras, that means that's where the revolt was. The answer is like, or it's simply stating that Rabbi Akiva students lived all over, which is more likely, and also because we know those are real places that would have been where he would have taught. Okay, and then again, so not honoring one another isn't enough of a reason for 24,000 to die, hinting at infighting and lost battles. So the problem with that is, but people do die for anything properly and for their sins, even nowadays, as we see. There are many stories of that in the Gemara and also in the Torah as well. So, and also some people's question about the fact that Rabbi Akiva says that that the world was destroyed when Rabbi Akiva students died. So it can't be that we're referring to just students dying. It must be that it's talking about the aftermath of the revolt. But the only problem with that is that Rabbi Akiva had in the Gemara continues to talk about Rabbi Akiva's new students. Doesn't talk about the rebuilding of Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, the focus is clearly on the students, not on anything else. Okay. And wait, there's no tab on this one, right? Continue on the proofs. So how come only Rabbi Akiva students died in the plague, as opposed to anybody else? Shouldn't for the actual plague, as unfortunately we're living through right now, there's a lot of collateral damage. So the other answer for that is or is divine punishment directed at those who sinned, in which case that's why it only affected the students, nobody else. Some would say that how could they die a bad death? All death is bad. Must be that they died in battle. The answer is that diphtheria is a very painful death, so it is definitely a fitting punishment, and you don't need to bring in the fact that it's a battle, because that's not necessarily proven. Okay. Also, why we mourn for the students of Rabbi Akiva and not for Rabbi Akiva himself? Right. Note that so they're saying why would we don't mourn the passing of Rabbi Akiva the same way we mourn the Omer. So one option is that, that's the point of the Gemara, is that the death of the students is that much more tragic than the death of Rabbi Akiva. And that's why we mourn, and because that's what the Gemara is trying to send us to. Okay, another you'll say is that Oscar must be a code word for not fighting united in battle. But the answer to that is that Oscar, meaning death by diphtheria, is actually a punishment for Lashon Hara, which would fit quite well with the problem of not honoring one another, which was the sin of Rabbi Akiva students. Okay, some people also like to point to the fact that this was news to me, that apparently women don't do work at night during Sfirot HaOmer, because they were busy burying the students who died. Therefore, so it couldn't be that all these students died just from they happened to die. Must be that they must have died in the revolt. If not, why are the women so busy? Why aren't the men being involved with the burials? So the other option is, as Rav Hai Gaon, we quoted earlier, says, is that the reality is that the men died just before sundown, which meant that their wives had to bury them after sundown. So, which was what led to that practice forming. Okay, but again, not necessarily an indication of part of revolt, just simply that is how the divine punishment played out. Okay, additionally, this is point that how could they not have honored one another? Doesn't Rabbi Akiva himself say, love your friend like yourself, is a great rule of the Torah? So what it must be that that they must have all died in battle. Otherwise, there's no way they could have not honored each other, because it's just a cover up. The response to that is that, Rabbi Akiva only started being very strong on the love your neighbor like yourself after he realized what was wrong with his first set of Talmidim, and he made sure to very much stress how important it is to love your friend. Okay, I see Claudette's shaking her head. Sorry, you're muted. You have a comment or, okay, fine. Okay,
I'm just saying I don't believe that last statement.
what?
It says Rabbi Akiva only learned his lesson after his students had died and began teaching differently. I don't believe it, because most of his life he was teaching about love. And he acted lovingly when he helped the poor and, you know, things like that.
Right, correct. So that's right. So one issue we'll get to is the years issue, right? If you really, if the students were actually, you know, at this point, so again, we'll get to the Rabbi Akiva is going to die. Here, let's fast forward to the next slide. Rabbi Akiva dies. That's Tishrei 3896, 136 CE, according to Seder Olam, which is, you know, roughly a year after the end of the Bar Kochba revolt. So it's like, so that would be a problem. But as far as if we don't know, let's say if his first 24,000 students happened when he was much younger, let's say, like, because, you know, when he was, you know, 24 years studying in, he was 40 when he started learning, and then after 24 years he had 24,000 students. So that means that Rabbi Akiva was 64 at the time, which gives him another almost 60 years of teaching Torah, which would make a lot more sense than saying that this all happened in the very short time frame at the end of his life. How did he miss this? How did students not internalize it? The answer is like the first 20 years of his teaching, he wasn't, you know, that wasn't what his main focus was. But afterwards, he started, you know, realizing what the students needed. Then he started adding it. Okay.
Yeah. And I have another, you said something earlier that why do we mourn on Lag BaOmer, the students, and not Rabbi Akiva? But it is known in Jewish life that we don't do that for a human being, because the Christian had done that with Christ. But we don't, you know, even Moses, we don't know where Moses is, so we can't, you know.
Right. So in general, you're right. We don't mourn the death of individuals.
The individual.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not Jewish practice to mourn another individual. Correct.
Yeah.
You're right. We don't. So that's why, again, we mourn, you know, when many people passed away, but we don't mourn simply the death of an individual. Right. So if you look for reasons of that we mourn, again, like on Tisha B'Av, right? So we don't, with the day of mourning, you'll note when we talk about in the keynote of the limitations of the day, we reference the destruction of
honor,
communities.
remember the person's memory, but we don't
Right.
make them a god.
Right. We remember them as part, like we remember the individuals as part of the collective who passed away, but we don't, you know, it's not just about so-and-so passed away, it's about the large amount of people and all of Israel together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So some people have also put forth the idea that Lag BaOmer is a secret day of victory, and that's why we stop mourning. But the only reason why that's not necessarily the case is because, well, Bar Kochba lost. So to have a secret day of celebration, which is why we celebrate Lag BaOmer because of the Bar Kochba revolt, would be in very bad taste because they all died, and the extent of which how many they died and how terrible that was. That's why we have the fourth bracha benching, which they instituted when they were finally able to bury the dead after people of Beitar passed away. The fourth bracha of benching, right, of grace after meals was done on the chance we had to actually bury the dead. So we were not celebrating the fact that they passed away. That would be very bad. Okay, another issue is, again, his Rabbi Akiva's having students in his old age wouldn't work out if he was the years that we're explained before. Another issue is that Rabbi Akiva is arrested for several years before he's executed. So if he was arrested because of involvement in the revolt, well, his death would have been not for teaching Torah, it would be for revolt. And he would have been and so that whole story we read would have made sense. And also the problem is that Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 at age 64. It should have increased over the next 50 some odd years. And why does it still say 24,000 if we're referring to the Bar Kochba revolt? It should have picked a different number. So clearly we're actually referring to Rabbi Akiva's actual students that he had when he was younger who passed away. Okay. So again, as far as Rabbi Akiva changed his mind about the revolt, So we discussed this earlier. Again, we're just doing a quick wrap up. And then again, if there's any questions about the whole thing, please let me know. Rabbi Akiva died as a result of the decree or after a failed revolt. So seemingly he believed in Bar Kochba till the very end, but when he died, he no longer believed. And then he may have gone back to the position of Rabbi Chaim Metzger, as we saw that why was he arrested and killed? Because he was teaching Torah, and and our tradition, and that's how we will survive, is by following Torah and mitzvot, not necessarily by leading violent rebellions against the government. For more on that, but Rabbi Chaim Metzger, I'll leave that till Tisha B'Av. We'll discuss more about Rabbi Chaim Metzger. So now just to sum up overall what we've covered this evening. Again, if anybody has any questions after this point, please feel free to ask them. So Rabbi Akiva supported Bar Kochba because of everything he stood for and the potential he had to be the Mashiach. Bar Kochba's name was changed by Rabbi Akiva to Son of the Star, but was later changed by the Gemara to Bar Kochba, son of the deception or the lie, for not living up to expectations. Remember, his original name was Bar Kochba. It's an S or Samach or Sigma in Greek. And Rabbi Akiva's 1,200 students, most likely did not die because of the revolt. They died because of their sins of not honoring one another, and that's it. So again, so thank you everybody for coming. Remember to join us tomorrow for the last installment of Rabbi Sammy Bergman. And thank you everybody for coming out and learning a little bit about Rabbi Akiva on this night now the night of Lag BaOmer.
Shakach, what time is it in Israel?
Right now it is 3:43 a.m., but it is well worth it. There's currently still a bonfire going on right outside my window.
Royal, big thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much for staying up to teach us this hour.
my honor and pleasure, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
But there was a tragedy in Meron. Did you hear? There a bleacher over